It's undeniable that after centuries of thought, we still don't know what it means to live a good life. Just like the ancient Greeks, many filmmakers today still beg audiences to think critically about ethics. I don't think I'm alone when I say that these theories can be really hard to digest. So today we'll be making them a bit more palatable by explaining these groundbreaking philosophies through the popular films of today. Specifically, we'll be exploring the hedonist pursuit of pleasure, Aristotle's construction of virtue, Epicurus' pleasure in moderation, and the all too infamous Stoic lifestyle. These films have plenty to teach us about the many pros and cons of dedicating yourself to these ways of living, and I guarantee you'll not only walk away with a firm understanding of these fundamental ideas, but you'll even have a firmer grasp on how to live the good life. While today we're covering the ancient ideas on ethics, I'll also be making 2 more videos on modern and postmodern ethics in film. If those ideas sound interesting to you, then please subscribe to stay tuned for more lessons on film and philosophy. I wanted to focus first on the simplest Greek theory of ethics, hedonism. If you think of characteristics that mark a good man, what comes to mind? You may think of nobility, honor, strength, compassion, or any host of good traits. But the hedonist finds this all to be quite misguided. If you ask yourself what thing underpins every good experience, when you get a promotion, when you spend meaningful time with your family, or when you help a friend through a hard time, the only common thing that exists in all these situations is the feeling of good or pleasure. So the hedonist argues that if pleasure is the only actual good in the world, then the only choices you should make in life are the ones that maximize your pleasure as much as possible. The more pleasure in your life, the more good and the better off you'll be. So finding a movie that actually embodies this simple lifestyle was actually harder than you'd expect. Usually, Hollywood characters do strive to be noble for the sake of being noble. They usually aren't so readily aware that in everything they do, they're actually just striving for pleasure. Hedonism requires a pure dedication to the pursuit of pleasure, and that's hard to find in conventional movies. But then I found our golden ticket. Spring Breakers. Spring Breakers takes place during a modern-day spring break, obviously, and it's about 4 state college-type girls who are weird and seem to be only driven by their desires. They begin the movie short on cash.
I'm not even like halfway to spring break, y'all.
Yet desperate to go to Florida to live up their wild dream of just letting go of life, just for a little while. So they make one of 2 big choices in the film. They rob a local diner to get the couple $100 they need to have a good time. Afterwards, they drive off to Florida, they drink, take drugs, and have sex, but are eventually met by cops who arrest them for their drug use. Down on their luck, the girls momentarily sink into their apathy, until a local rapper and drug dealer, played by James Franco of all people, swoops in to pay for their bail. From here on, the film drives forward towards increasingly gross heights of pleasure until 2 of these girls drop out of the group to return back to their normal lives, while the other 2 continue to pursue their desire to its bitter end. On the surface, you may agree this film shows a hedonistic way of living, but it doesn't feel particularly insightful, but I actually couldn't disagree more. Spring Breakers not only shows what living a hedonistic life might look like through its story, but it also uncannily illustrates how it might feel to live for pleasure and pleasure only through its editing and cinematography. So, what would it look like if you truly believed the only good choice is the one filled with that immediate pleasure? Firstly, I love how this story handles the concept of spring break.
I just finally feel like I can be who I was supposed to be here.
The film juxtaposes spring break against the threat of returning to a normal life.
God, it was so nice to get a break from reality for a little while.
Up until our characters begin to realize that spring break could be the way they live forever.
I never want to go home. Never want to go back.
In real life, the cultural tradition of spring break has college-aged kids traveling and retreating into the anonymity of a new place. Week-long benders filled with day drinking, psychedelics, and stimulants, and the freedom to have sex without that sort of reputation following you home. Freedom to enjoy the materialistic things, to spend your money superfluously. And at the end of the day, what's so wrong with that? After all, these choices only have to do with you and your pleasure, yet most people just intuitively know this isn't the way to actually live your life. But I ask again, why not? What's so wrong with living to have fun?
Ready, steady.
Do you wanna?
They're untamable, and the film presents this fact with glory. Slow motion shots, bright saturated colors, free moving cameras. The cinematography is as free and beautiful as being able to have fun with no sense of what the normal world thinks. Compare this freedom to the conventional, the grays, the static camera, the glee-less expressions.
So tired of seeing the same things every single day.
The normal world is dull, and it wants to try to trick you that this is the way it should be. The institutions of religion and education, they say that they're important because they say that they're important. It's intangible nonsense.
Everything's the same and everyone's just sad. I don't want to end up like them. I really want to get out of here.
This, on the other hand, that feeling of ecstasy, that freedom, that's real.
You can change your life. You can change who you are, y'all. And this lasts forever.
Selena Gomez's character, Faith, has a profound self-discovery thanks to this freedom. Out of the 4 girls, she's the most conventionally moral thanks to her Christian background, but we immediately get the sense that her faith has become half-hearted. What may have once been uplifting has become constraining and judgmental. So when her friends inspire her to live hedonistically, to live freely, she feels something new.
I'm starting to think this is the most spiritual place I've ever been.
I think we found ourselves here. It's way more than just having a good time. God, it was so nice to get a break from reality for a little while. Feels as if the world is perfect. Like it's never gonna end.
In this sense, hedonism can be a positive force by inspiring you to break free from the chains of morality and to realize that you can live happily in ways that you thought were forever prohibited.
If we could freeze life, and freeze it and say, this is the way it's gonna be forever. Like have this moment together forever.
But of course, Faith becomes the first to notice how their path down pleasure may have taken them too far.
Why is this happening?
Freeze, motherfuckers! Hands on the motherfucking air!
This is where we're supposed to find ourselves. This is where we're supposed to find who we are.
Fucking money now, bitch.
Why did this happen?
She uncovers how badly her friend's actions make her feel.
I feel comfortable. I want to go home. This is not what I signed up for.
And she retreats back home.
Let's go home. Please come back with me. Please come back home with me.
In a sense, you could argue she's still living hedonistically. Living this lifestyle is no longer pleasurable for her, and she can find more pleasure in returning home, so she does. It's hedonistic. But I find this perspective a little misleading. With careful observation, you can see that Faith was never suited for hedonistic living. On a few separate occasions, Faith opens up with the other characters and shares her reflections on herself, her fears, her newfound joys, her identity. But as she shares, these other characters' eyes glaze over. They make fun of her. This kind of self-reflection is unwelcome in hedonism. You don't need to create any large-scale idea of yourself to live well. You just need to be in the moment and always pursuing the most pleasurable choice. This stark contrast between Faith and the other girls unveils hedonism's biggest fault. Even though you believe this to be freeing, it's actually, ironically, stripping away at you, your ability to make your own choices and your sense of your own identity. And that's revealed in this story's structure. Usually, when I'm analyzing a character and their story, I tend to find the truths that the film wants to reveal through the character's choices. But Spring Breakers has a different approach. Instead of revealing truth through thoughtful choice, these characters are marked by their absence of choice, the absence of rationality. In my last video, I compared Whiplash and Babylon's structures, and I exposed the truths the two films impart by analyzing each character's choices. I'm actually extremely proud of that video. It's a long one, but definitely well worth it, so go check it out if you haven't already. But the reason I bring it up is because in traditional films, each scene forces a character to change. Something has to happen. This keeps the film pushing towards more and more intense change, and it keeps the audience engaged. In this case though, we just see how one pleasurable scene casually leads to the next pleasurable scene, which leads to the next pleasurable scene, and so on, with no real choice in between. Usually, a film that shows characters circling around with little change will inevitably bore its audience, but because this film is about hedonism, this structure actually becomes perfect. Written into its structure is hedonism's biggest fault, that you become animalistic in seeking pleasure. You shouldn't worry about who you were yesterday. You should only focus on how to make yourself feel good right now. In this sense, there's no personal code of ethics that makes you who you are. There's only the moment right in front of you. Now we see a different kind of cinematography, one reflecting this aimless irrationality. Each light is tinged with beams of light as if you yourself live within this fading, drunken perspective. The colors glow with saturated glee as if even the colors want you to feel its heightened pleasure. The camera drills close into each character's face and disorients you within that space, making it difficult to even find your bearing. You feel overwhelmed by your senses as if you're living in this hedonistic state of numbing ecstasy. The once fun montage becomes a disorienting, rapid cutting. Realistic faces morph into fragmented impressions as if the real world, the rational world, is a distant truth, fading. Fading ethics, fading rationality. Without that connection to the real traditional world, what happens to treating others with dignity? These four girls have no reservation in the face of threatening people for money, threatening people's lives for fun, and even killing other people, all because they just feel like it. How can hedonism prevent people from doing these clearly bad things? How can hedonism ensure people do the clearly good things? Stuck between seeing hedonism as freeing, yet also stripping away at your faculties for reason and for agency, the film makes its best choice yet. We hear a voicemail that Faith left for her parents.
Yeah, Mom, it was really great. I think we found ourselves here.
She talks about the freedom of this new world, of finding herself.
We're different people now. We see things differently.
Only this time, we're seeing a different kind of world.
More colors, more love, more understanding. God, it was so nice to get a break from reality for a little while. I know we have to go back to school, but we'll always remember this trip. Something so amazing, magical, something so beautiful.
By this moment in the film, two of the girls have dropped out of this new lifestyle. The remaining two are swept away by James Franco's materialistic world, a world empty of morals.
This is my fucking dream, y'all. All this shit. Look at my shit. I got designer t-shirts. I got Escape, Calvin Klein Escape. I got my fucking nunchucks. I got Shuriken. Look at my shit. Look at this motherfucker here. Look at this motherfucker. Huh? A fucking army up in this shit.
The optimistic tone of the voicemail that once praised hedonism's ability to rediscover yourself, to let loose, now has become pessimistic.
Yeah, Mom, it was really great. I think we found ourselves here.
These girls have found a new version of themselves through hedonism, yes, but it's not one that most people would praise. And the next day, they drive off under the beautiful rays of sunlight, ready to lose themselves in their next pursuit of pleasure. In this final scene, we see how Spring Breakers has perfectly captured the potential benefits and criticisms of living a hedonistic life by forcing the audience to confront both aspects at the same time. The voicemail represents the idea that pleasure is the only actual good, and it's a surprisingly compelling case. We've seen how freeing it can truly be to finally let yourself pursue what you want, outside of what the world wants from you. But these two final girls represent hedonistic's aimlessness, how you can become a slave to the material life and to the opportunities right in front of you. We see how rationality might be tossed aside, and we see how only listening to what you desire may lead you down a life of emotionless crime against your fellow humans. In the end, pleasure may be the only actual good, but following it blindly can't be the way to practically live a good life. Now, at this point, I'm going to do what all YouTubers do, but I'm going to do it a bit more insistent. You should subscribe. If you found this video pleasurable so far, I mean, you're still here, then you can maximize your pleasure by subscribing. But if you're not a hedonist and instead believe in the next ethical theory, then you should still subscribe. My videos tend to be geared towards uncovering truths behind popular films through rationality. You'll discover ways of living your life more virtuously by thoughtfully engaging in my content. If you agree or disagree with my ideas, at the end of the day, you'll be engaging rationally and trying to figure out what is good and what is bad, and according to Aristotle, that is the best way to live. Aristotle believed that at the core of asking what you should do is another question. What is a human's purpose? He could look at something like a hammer and say the hammer's purpose is to hit a nail. Inherent in its design is that end goal. So all those unique properties of the hammer, its hammer head, its handle, it's all part of its essence, and that essence is tied towards its end goal of being able to hammer something. He figured even in things that are not man-made, things in nature, there still exists this essence. He famously looked at an acorn and described its essence as all of its properties that drive it towards an end goal of becoming a tree. So now that we have essence squared away, we can begin to think about ethics, about what is good. Aristotle decided that the good of this acorn is how effectively it embodies its essence, and thus how effectively it drives towards becoming a tree. An acorn can only flourish by enhancing its unique qualities so well that it one day achieves its end. Therefore, Aristotle labels this flourishing as eudaimonia. It's not in actually achieving your end, but it's in doing your unique thing that will inevitably push you to achieve that end. Once the acorn achieves its final endpoint, becoming a tree, the acorn ceases to exist. So it can't really be good or bad anymore. Instead, flourishing only occurs while the acorn is still an acorn. So the acorn is good or bad in how well it works towards this end, how well it performs its essence, how well an acorn acorns. So Aristotle turned these observations on humans. He figured that if he could find the unique essence of being human, then he could say our good is applying our unique purpose because it'll naturally lead us to flourishment. So he asked, compared to all of nature, what makes us unique? He was able to immediately refute hedonism because every animal has pleasure that's not unique to us. So it can't be our unique means to flourish. So hedonism is already out of the picture. He looked next to honor, to public praise, and saw that that could be taken away from us. This essence needs to be something that we're born with. Honor, wealth, health, they can all be taken away too. Instead, he discovered that rationality must be what's unique to us. No other animal or object of nature has it. Our ability to observe the natural world, to create logic from it, and to live our life accordingly, that's our essence. Therefore, if rationality is our essence, then applying our rationality will drive us towards our flourishment, our eudaimonia. In the same sense that an acorn must acorn, a human must human as well. But Aristotle acknowledges that just applying rationality isn't enough. One acorn may sprout into a tree better than another acorn, even though they both exercise their function of growing into that tree. So just like an acorn, we must perform our function well. We must perform our function with virtue. Aristotle realizes that if the acorn has too little water, it dies. If the acorn has too much water, it also dies. It must strive for that perfect middle ground in how it acorns. So Aristotle labels this perfect middle as virtue. He concludes that a human's only should is to apply their rationality virtuously. For example, if you're too courageous, you'll be rash. But if you're not courageous enough, you'll be cowardly. Therefore, you must apply your rationality only within that perfect virtuous middle. From here, Aristotle provides a list of many other similar virtues. Being modest is the balance between being shameless and shy. Temperance is between being self-indulgent and being unfeeling. Magnanimity lies between being vain and being unambitious. The list goes on. This is one of the more dense ethical theories we'll cover today, but it beautifully sets the stage for centuries of ethics, even to this day. The obvious question that follows this framework is, well, how can I live with virtue? What does the perfect middle even look like? Well, Aristotle, the philosopher, argued that you'd be a philosopher. Who would have thought? The movie that best captures this perfect virtuosity, this dedication to the life of philosophy, this absolute pinnacle of human flourishing is Groundhog Day. Yeah, it's Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day. Bill Murray's character Phil is a weatherman visiting the town Punxsutawney to cover the annual Groundhog Day ritual, and needless to say, he's less than thrilled.
I want you to look in the mirror and see what you look like when you do that little groundhog thing, okay?
On the surface, you could say he's a rational guy insofar as he's smart enough to be a sarcastic asshole.
I hope you enjoyed the festivities.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I'm going to.
But he's definitely not virtuous. He's inauthentic.
Wow, looking foxy tonight, man.
He's dismissive of others.
Like the groundhog, Phil?
Yeah, like the groundhog.
And he's just the worst.
You sleep okay without me?
But then, as if the world wants to punish him for his cruelty, he's forced into purgatory to live the same day over and over.
What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered?
That sums it up for me.
At first, this seems like a curse, but then he's quickly able to use his power for his own pleasure.
No tomorrow. That will mean there will be no consequences. There will be no hangovers. We could do whatever we wanted.
Phil Connors, Ned.
With this predicament, he's able to learn everybody's
This is
deepest
Doris.
desires.
More than anything else in her life, she wants to see Paris before she dies. This is Debbie Kleiser and her fiancé Fred. They're supposed to be getting married this afternoon, but Debbie is having second thoughts. This is Bill. He likes the town, he paints toy soldiers, and he's gay.
I am.
And through trial and error, through living the same moments over and over,
Can I buy you a drink?
Okay. Sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist, please.
Can I buy you a drink?
Okay.
Sweet vermouth, rocks with a twist, please.
he becomes intimately familiar with every outcome of this one day.
Well, maybe the real God uses tricks. You know, maybe he's not omnipotent, he's just been around so long, he knows everything.
Crucially, through this practice, he becomes a master of cause and effect.
I told you, I know everything. In about 5 seconds, a waiter's gonna drop a tray of dishes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay?
Okay, that's enough.
And there's some insight that Aristotle has to say about this. The happiest life is lived by someone who has a full understanding of the basic causal principles that govern the operation of the universe, and who has the resources needed for living a life devoted to the exercise of that understanding. In this sense, Phil has become the most perfect embodiment of human rationality, better than any man, likely even better than Aristotle could ever be. Aristotle compares it to the life of a god. God thinks without interruption and endlessly, and a philosopher enjoys something similar for a limited period of time. Except Phil doesn't have a limited period of time. The one caveat Aristotle gives, Phil has overcome. So in this way, Phil has truly become the most human he could be, the perfect rationalist. But something's missing. Even with all that power, he's void of something. Phil has earned the love of every woman in this town. He's used his perfect rationality to seamlessly trick these women into going to bed with him.
What's your name?
Nancy Taylor, and you are?
What high school did you go to? Who was your 12th grade English teacher? Nancy. Lincoln. Walsh. Okay, thanks very much. Nancy? Nancy Taylor! Lincoln High School! I sat next to you in Mrs. Walsh's English class.
But that doesn't work on Rita.
Stop it!
Why? Because she craves virtuosity.
What are you looking for? Who is your perfect guy?
Well, first of all, he's too humble to know he's perfect. He's intelligent, supportive, funny. He's romantic and courageous. He's got a good body, but he doesn't have to look in the mirror every 2 minutes. He's kind, sensitive, and gentle. He's not afraid to cry in front of me.
This is a man we're talking about, right?
She can sense his inauthenticity from a mile away. She knows he's missing Aristotle's key ingredient, applying his perfect rationality well.
I am really close on this one.
In this way, Phil's definitely become the best rationalist he could possibly be, and especially according to Aristotle. But he's still not virtuous. Therefore, he hasn't flourished. He hasn't achieved eudaimonia.
Okay, campers, rise and shine.
So he sinks into despair. His cheap tricks of manipulation bring him no joy anymore. He's exhausted that side of himself. Without the affection of Rita, without filling this gap in himself, he feels the true weight of his curse. Left with nothing, he believes his life is meaningless. While this truly aches to see as an audience member, his meaninglessness means he's a blank slate. So he begins doing what he's never tried before. He becomes dedicated to things other than himself. One day, as he wallows, he comes across a homeless man struggling to hold himself up, and almost from nowhere, Phil decides to help him.
Let's get you someplace warm. Yeah, remember me?
He takes him to a doctor, insists he gets the care he needs, and when Phil does a final check before leaving, he learns that the man died.
Are you the one who brought the old man in?
Mm-hmm. How's he?
Well, he just passed away.
For no reason, just
What did he die of?
old age.
He was just old. It was just his time.
Phil's anguish surfaces, and he denies this outcome.
Sometimes people just die.
Not today.
The next days he spends caring for the man, trying to find a way to give him fulfillment or to prevent his death. We see Phil turn to studying, and later in the film hear him referenced as a doctor. He dedicated himself to learning, presumably years of studying just to save one man. And he just can't.
Come on, Dad. Come on, Pop. Come on, Pop.
This is the first instance we see Phil care for somebody outside himself, and it's in the most surprising circumstance. His unchecked pride is humbled. There are things that, even with all of his power, are simply out of his control. So he reorients himself back towards the middle, the humble, virtuous middle. He finds empathy, something he's been warding off with his flippant sarcasm and consistent self-interest. Now he carries compassion towards the rest of his little world. Every repeating day he catches a kid from a tree, saves a choking man, and fixes a flat tire. But one has to ask, for what end? These aren't things that can come back to reward him because there is no tomorrow to return the favor. These acts don't build on themselves. They're almost nonsensical. You'd think knowing these harms will happen every day no matter what, you'd become numb to them. But instead, Phil acts on the contrary. With no sense of personal gain, he uses his perfect rationality, his intimate understanding of this world to be benevolent, to be kind, to be virtuous. Now, Phil has dedicated himself wholeheartedly to these acts, even going as far as to write off time with Rita in favor of these good things.
Phil! Errands? What errands?
Ironically, it's through this dedication to the good that he comes to authentically earn Rita's affection. Earlier, he tried to use his power cruelly to pry that love out of her.
Fast for me.
Me too.
Maybe I should go.
But now he earns her affection by being good.
It's that nice young man from the motor club. Thank you again.
It's nothing, ladies.
What's that all about?
I really don't know. They've been hitting on me all night.
Not to be good with strings attached.
I never thanked you properly for what you did for Buster. Well, he would have choked for sure.
Well, he may have. He was trying to swallow a whole cow. I owe you one, buddy.
What did you do today?
Oh, same old, same old.
Just to be virtuous for its own sake.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
I want to thank you for fixing Felix's back.
Oh.
He can even help around the house again.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Felix.
Dr. Connors?
It's kind of an honorary title.
Everything that Rita wanted, that humble, perfectly balanced, virtuous partner, Phil has embodied. And he became this perfect being not to win her love. He just simply did it for itself, for its own good, regardless of any outcome.
No matter what happens tomorrow, or for the rest of my life, I'm happy now. Because I love you.
I think I'm happy too.
And with that, the spell breaks.
It's too early. Oh.
By living each day for itself, by enjoying the virtuous life, Phil achieves something every man should dream of. He achieves eudaimonia. The takeaway from this film is beautifully simple, yet it perfectly maps onto Aristotle's complex ideas around human flourishing. The time loop permits Phil to become the perfect rationalist. He embodies that human essence perfectly, but Rita's high standards for love comes to represent the condition that this essence be applied virtuously. When Phil finally embodies both, he achieves eudaimonia exactly as Aristotle conceives it, and the cosmic force that locked him in this purgatory grants him his freedom. Through Phil's journey from a narcissist to a rationalist to a virtuous rationalist, the film perfectly depicts how one can rise above their egoism through Aristotle's virtue ethics. With this unexpectedly beautiful depiction of Aristotle's virtue ethics, we can put a name to the way in which Aristotle believes we should live. But I want to warn against getting too swept up in it. I do find Aristotle's logic to be enticing. I love the idea that rationality is a uniquely human quality, and I love how he includes the virtuous component. It makes sense that we need to do our own unique thing well. But within this broad doctrine, I find it difficult to find what exactly is virtuous. For one, you may be looking at the argument and see that Aristotle asks the question, how can you apply rationality in a good way? But he answers by saying you just need to apply it good. It's circular reasoning. So when you go on to live virtuously, you can fill that term with anything that you believe fits because it has no real meaning. There's no argument there. It becomes something that's completely subjective. And you can even see how different cultures may have different ideas of what virtuous living is. Similarly, if virtue is the perfect middle between extremes, well, that perfect middle will likely look extremely different from person to person. My idea of perfect humility or perfect courage may look completely different from yours. Therefore, Aristotle's theory is way too abstract to give conclusive advice on what you ought to do with your life, outside of just being rational. So that's where Epicurus may help give you a clearer idea. Greek philosopher Epicurus holds on to our earlier core of hedonism, the idea that even if you follow Aristotle's conception of virtue, the only real good is still the pleasure you get from it. So in Phil's case, he still does the kind thing he does because it makes him feel good or it helps him avoid feeling bad. There is no other reason why he'd do it. That being said, Epicurus wants to introduce some nuance to help avoid all the excess of living like the girls in Spring Breakers. He actually does believe that Aristotle's ideas of rationality and virtue are important because it maximizes your potential for pleasure. That's the key. So the girls in Spring Breakers make a mistake because they delve so extremely into pleasure seeking that they stop thinking. They lose their sense of identity, and as a result, they miss out on what he believes are the higher pleasures of living meaningfully. But Epicurus also dislikes Aristotle's firm and serious approach of living dutifully and avoiding pleasure entirely. How good could that life be when you eliminate all the fun of life? So he promotes finding a middle ground. Be virtuous enough so you'll experience the pleasure of stable well-being rather than only living for moment-to-moment physical delight. This immediately puts Epicurus on stabler ground than the pure hedonist, thanks to it better matching our intuitive common sense. Epicurus's practical advice can be summarized like this. He argues that you must first meet your basic needs to survive. Then, after that, the only thing you should do is strive for stable pleasure by using your rationality virtuously, like Aristotle, but only insofar as it maximizes your pleasure and helps calm your suffering. Beyond those tenets, Epicurus just shares some lovely suggestions. Indulge in the high pleasures, not the low pleasures of drugs, sex, and the indulgences. Instead, Epicurus promoted a really wholesome lifestyle of living with your loved ones. Retreat from the chaos of life and enjoy sharing your life and your thoughts with your friends. After all, you both will be able to lift each other up in ways that maximizes your well-being better than if you were just alone. Ironically, I'm unsure if Aristotle would promote this idea of shared living, even as beautifully simple as it is. So now let's get to the bigger question. What does this life actually look like? Well, I found two movies that I think really well capture the essence of this philosophy. The Danish film Another Round and the long-form improv film My Dinner with Andre. In the same vein as Spring Breakers, the film opens with high school kids doing their ritualistic case race around the lake. In that same montage style, we see the beauty and the disgust of indulging to that level. But the tone is much more light-hearted. Life is fun. Dull. Life is dull. Here we meet our actual main characters. Not college students, but middle-aged high school teachers. Contrasted against the liberated enthusiasm of those young kids earlier, here instead we find boredom, disinterest, apathy. Our main character, Martin, senses this in himself, and he asks his wife,
Annika, synes du, jeg har været kedelig?
Hvad mener du?
Synes du, jeg er kedelig?
This is the climate the film begins with, and it's the climate we all sink into with routine. As we age, we must become mature. We must take up our duties. We must live virtuously. But with that maturity comes the banal. Barely holding it all in, he collapses under this existential dread.
Nå, Martin. Hvad så? Hvad sker der?
Ikke så meget.
His friends swoop in to temporarily raise him up and support him, and where before he refused a drink because he had too much work to do, now he allows himself to sink into his indulgence. This becomes the catalyst for his life to change, to become lived again. At the dinner party, his psychology teacher friend mentioned a theory he had come across. Basically that everyone would thrive in all aspects of life, professionally and socially, if they were always just a little bit drunk.
Ja. Så det jo der, hvor du sådan bliver sådan lidt mere afslappet, kælsk og åben. Mere modig, simpelthen, ikke? Det siger jeg, ja.
So, desperate for a change, Martin decides to test this. In a high school bathroom stall, right before teaching. As he made his way to class, my heart began to sink in fear. But then, almost magically, a long-lost light gleams in his eyes once again. He shares the news with his friends, and with the psych teacher's guiding hand, they begin a structured psychological experiment.
Undersøgelse af Finn Skårderuds hypotese om, at mennesket er født med en halv promille for lidt.
They'll all drink, only 1 to 2 glasses of wine, every day, at work, every day.
Nå, men det er det jo. Altså, bliver det jo nødt til at være, jo. Men det er jo ligesom Hemingway. Ikke? Vi drikker ikke efter 8.
Immediately, any outsider could look at this and think this is wrong. Occasionally here in America, we hear stories of teachers drinking on the job, and the thought of being around impressionable young kids while oozing whiskey breath is immediately revolting. Yet, this film doesn't want to push the morality of this just yet. In fact, they might be pushing just the opposite. Martin becomes liberated by his indulgence. Life sparks back into the classroom as he reels the students in with fun games. He asks his students to pick between 3 candidates.
Der er 3 kandidater at vælge mellem. Hvem vil du stemme på?
He briefly describes the 3 in vague terms, without any names.
Højt blodtryk, han lider af blodmangel, han har i det hele taget en perlerække af meget alvorlige sygdomme. Så lyver han, hvis det passer i hans kram, og han spørger en astrolog til råds om det meste af sin politik. Nummer 2. Han er overvægtig. Han har allerede tabt 3 valg. Han har haft en depression. Han har haft 2 hjertetilfælde. Den sidste, mine damer her, nummer 3. Han er en højt dekoreret krigshelt. Han behandler kvinder med respekt. Han elsker dyr. Han ryger aldrig, og han drikker kun en enkelt øl en sjældent gang imellem. Jose, hvem vil du stemme på? Den sidste, nummer 3. Ja. Okay. Og hvad siger I andre? 3. Pyha. Godt, for I har lige fravalgt Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston L. Churchill, men til gengæld har I valgt, gud skal takke lov for det, ham her.
You can see the students' sudden joy in learning, especially compared to Martin's class before indulging in the pleasure of life.
Opfindelsen af ny teknologi.
It becomes clear that even though this drinking on the job may be morally unvirtuous, and Aristotle surely wouldn't condone it, the outcome is that not only are the students learning better, not only is Martin teaching better, but he's flourishing while doing it.
Det er godt nok lang tid siden, jeg har haft det så godt her. Der sker et eller andet. Også når jeg er ædru.
You can see it in his eyes, in his smile, in his demeanor, in his passion. From Aristotle's point of view, he found nothing more virtuous than being a philosopher and sharing your insights with the world around you. And this is exactly what Martin has achieved. Yet it's through indulging in your pleasure, not removing yourself from it as Aristotle might suggest.
Synes du er kedelig?
Förhållande till vad? När vi var unga eller?
Ja.
Du är inte samma Martin som jag träffade.
Okay.
This is exactly Epicurus' insight with his kind of virtuous hedonism. He argues we should pursue making our life pleasurable, and that being virtuous is worthwhile too, but we should always remind ourselves that the goal is to do the virtuous thing and enjoy it, not do it out of obligation. Ironically, in this case, it's through Martin's ability to seek pleasure that he begins to flourish, not out of his sense of moral duty. We see this trend continue as he drinks more. He gets a little sloppier, but he's able to grip his students' attention even more. And when earlier the students had shared their worries about being able to pass their history exam, now Martin is able to fill them up with the courage of Churchill by comparing the students' own excessive drinking with legendary figures of history themselves.
Mange af jer er med i søløb. Slet ikke føle jer så ked af det alene, for I er i rigtig godt selskab. Okay? Både Grant, Hemingway og gamle Winston C. de kunne banke jer ud af banen i søløbet, uden at brække sig. Jo, det kunne de. Jo. Men så er spørgsmålet jo bare, hvis I kommer op i historie, hvem er jer ambitiøse unge mennesker, der ender med at dumpe med et brag? Og hvem er jer, der består? Med andre ord, hvem af jer vil gøre ligesom Hemingway og putte et havgevær i munden og blæse hovedet af? Og hvem af jer vil vinde en verdenskrig? Okay? Jo.
And it's not just Martin's life that becomes better through indulging, but all of Martin's friends' lives too. The choir teacher connects with the students by enthusiastically experimenting with the space. The soccer coach connects with a bullied student named Specs. And the group of friends reconnect with their childhood by drunkenly playing soccer together, shoving each other around in youthful enthusiasm. Finally, Martin makes dinner for his family again. He sporadically plans a canoe trip, and he even finds the joy in reconnecting with his wife. But although Epicurus preaches pleasure, he also preaches moderation. The group decides to push their study further, and in the confines of their home, they set out to get more drunk than ever before.
Jeg kunne godt tænke mig, at vi også længere op over det. Altså simpelthen total renselse.
Martin, already having discovered this new profound power of the pleasure in life, he decides he wants out.
Jeg tror, jeg stopper her, drenge.
Nej, det rigtigt?
Jeg tror bare, det på tide, jeg...
But as he steps away, the prospects of more begins calling to him.
Er du sikker på det, Martian?
He caves.
Ja.
Ej, fy for satan, Nikolaj, du har taget Ja. Kom, børn, undskyld. Nikolaj er selv rammer. Ved du hvad, jeg tænker, du ikke kan passe på dine børn længere. Nikolaj, forstår du, hvad jeg siger?
The group has gone too far. Marriages collapse. Their roles as fathers implode, and even their jobs, the thing that benefited most, are at risk.
Men der har været vedvarende meldinger om, at en eller flere fra lærergruppen igennem længere tid har indtaget alkohol her på stedet.
Their friend, the coach, loses his job. He loses his sobriety.
Ja, jeg tror også, jeg har nogle kolde bajer stående her et eller andet sted. Som et. Ja. Jeg tror, vi skal lade dem der stå. Ja, dem lader vi lige stå. Ja.
He loses his life. Pleasure-seeking has led them astray. What once filled them with meaning has now stripped all meaning away from them. Alcohol is a drug that'll rip your life to shreds if kept unchecked. How can Epicurus stand on solid ground now? It's clear that pleasure-seeking might be temporarily beneficial, but in the long term, it's unsustainable. No, I mean, it's life-ruining, life-ending. It's this tragic lesson that Aristotle or the Stoics want to impart, but Epicurus craves a bit more nuance, and so does this film. Even after seeing how life-threatening alcohol can be, one of the teachers is approached by a student with unrelenting nerves leading up to his exam.
Fuldstændig baglås i står til eksamen. Jeg kan ikke gå 3G om endnu en gang. Så.
And the teacher, knowing the liberating power of indulgence, sneaks him alcohol to help him calm down.
Kom nu. Tag en ordentlig sove. Men du, lad være med at gøre det til en vane, ikke?
And when he sat down to take the exam, at first he struggles, but then he thrives.
Angstanalysen var det, ikke? Jo, angstanalysen hos Kierkegaard belyser blandt andet, hvorledes et menneske kan forholde sig til det at kunne fejle.
Og endnu vigtigere?
Det er at have fejlet. Man skal altså acceptere sig selv som fejlbarlig for at kunne elske andre og livet.
Sebastian, kan du give os et eksempel på det?
Ja. Jeg har selv fejlet.
At the coach's funeral, as the casket departs for the cemetery, Specs, the anxious, picked-on kid who this coach passionately invested his love in, he drops a rose in the car, and now he confidently leads his peers in song. When Martin's students finish the exam, where before they were helpless to pass, now they pass with flying colors, and they praise Martin for his help. Finally, when Martin, despairing over his broken marriage, receives a text from his wife that she misses him too, it's here Martin celebrates emphatically. There's been a small detail in this film that I've omitted, but now I want to share. Martin's friends have been egging him on to dance. It's the one thing that Martin won't join in on with his friends. In his past, more youthful, more liberated life, he danced jazz ballet. But now, in his adult life, something stops him from expressing himself so freely. That is, something stopped him. Now he dances absurdly. He drinks and throws himself around with no care for retaining that appearance of maturity, that appearance of being an adult. He's a child again. We see him dance among the fray of wine and champagne, the thing that, yes, may have killed his best friend, but also the thing that liberated him from living a meaningless, pleasureless life. I've seen people on the internet argue that this film is a cautionary tale on alcoholism, and I agree that it does show its downsides, of course, but that's missing the bigger picture. You can't forget that the film celebrates alcohol as the catalyst for Martin to find joy in all aspects of his life again. And when the film shows the young people's drinking games and celebrations, we can't help but compare it to these adults drinking together again. And therefore, the film beautifully presents these adult friends reconnecting with their youth. And what does that youth look like? It's freedom to unwind, to indulge, to be playful, to do the not so serious things that adults can't afford to do anymore. This to me is Epicurus' most important criticism of Aristotle's ethics. Aristotle poises acting virtuously as the ultimate goal, but if you live your life for only that end, for just acting noble, you'll likely find yourself imprisoned by what you ought to do. You must always be honorable, just, wise, or any other self-serious virtue that Aristotle endorses. Compare that serious attitude to the newfound attitudes of these friends. They banter, they laugh, they're serious when it's called for, but they're also playful when that's needed too. They cut loose and relax with each other as authentic friends, not some image of what they ought to be. This is an extremely important aspect of Epicurus' thought that I left out: friendship. He believed that one of the most important additions to making a good life is having a friend who shares your values, having someone you can sit with to reflect and to rationalize with. And beyond it just being more pleasurable, you both can boost each other up and support each other in figuring out how to maximize your pleasure. Just the nature of these friends conducting a rational experiment together is 100% something Epicurus would celebrate. Even more important though are those moments where these friends sense despair in each other. They show up for one another, both physically but also in the subtler emotional ways. They keep each other on the right track as best they can because that's what friends do, and that's what Epicurus believes is necessary for a good life. Of course, as the film progresses, we see these friends' pleasure-seeking go way too far, but this is exactly what Epicurus wants to impart. He preaches everything in moderation. As these friends learn, going too far in these indulgences has dire outcomes. But the film doesn't want this tragedy to teach a complete retreat, an abstinence towards pleasure, as Aristotle may promote. Instead, the film endorses the return to the pleasures with these lessons learned, as Martin dances, celebrating his restored purpose through seeking life's pleasures. There are things the film doesn't capture in representing Epicureanism. For one, we don't see as much of that rationalization that Epicurus still values. We get the friends experiment and these characters are teachers, but beyond that, there's not much rationality-centered conversations. Secondly, Epicurus wants to distinguish between lower and higher pleasures, and he argues that we should pursue the higher pleasures that create a more stable well-being. The central aspect of this film, drinking, is definitely a low pleasure. But the film does explore some higher pleasures too, with the recurrence of music, dancing, and even Martin's infectious joy towards teaching. That being said, it's not totally accurate to refer to the film's drinking as Epicurean, but the message of moderation within drinking is absolutely core to Epicurus' teachings. Outside of those inaccuracies, I find this film to be such a joyous representation of how pursuing your own pleasure, as counter to common morality as it may seem, may actually make you more fulfilled, because at the end of the day, this is your only life, so why not make it as moderately joyous as you possibly can? So far on this project, I've wanted to just find one film that captures the general attitude and outcome of each of these ethical theories, but I couldn't help but throw in the cult classic My Dinner with Andre to make up for another round of shortcomings. My Dinner with Andre is a partially improvised, partially written story about two playwrights catching up after years of separation. Our main character is Wally. He's a thespian, just barely getting by in the overbearing capital of the Western world. Complacency is the name of his lifestyle. He's seemingly accepted his daily routine and similarly accepts that he's happy with the scraps of meaning he can salvage from it. He doesn't really seem to dwell on it too much. After all, he has a busy life to attend to.
There were dozens of things to do.
On the other hand, we have Andre. He's a more successful playwright who spent his adult life as a near ascetic.
I mean, how did I feel about anything? I didn't know. What kind of things did I like? What kind of people did I really want to be with, you know? And the only way that I could think of to find out was to just cut out all the noise and stop performing all the time and just listen to what was inside me.
The first half of this film is just about Andre sharing his stories about his travels in different cultures and finding meaning with random travelers by dropping that facade, the routine, the roles that the Western world gives us.
A world in which fathers or single people or artists are all trying to live up to someone's fantasy of how a father or a single person or an artist should look and behave. The trouble, Wally, with always being active and doing things is that I think it's quite possible to do all sorts of things and at the same time be completely dead inside. I mean, you're doing all these things, but are you doing them because you really feel an impulse to do them? Or are you doing them mechanically, as we were saying before? Because I really do believe that if you're just living mechanically, then you have to change your life.
Only a couple of times do we see Wally try to speak up, to butt heads with Andre's worldview, but then he just seems to resign in himself, as if nobody really should care what he has to say.
Oh, when you mentioned the violets, it reminded me of that. It was about, well, so that was, that was Christmas.
That remains the case until around the 54-minute mark.
I think I do know what really disturbs me about the work you've described, and I don't even know if I can express it.
From here on, it becomes a dialogue, a rational dialogue.
It'd be like to live for certain moments without having any particular thing that you were supposed to be doing. And I think I just simply object to that. I mean, I just don't think I accept the idea that there should be moments in which you're not trying to do anything. I think that purposefulness is part of our ineradicable basic human structure, and to say that we ought to be able to live without it is like saying that a tree ought to be able to live without branches or roots, but actually without branches or roots it wouldn't be a tree. I mean, it would just be a log. You see what I'm saying?
The two ask each other questions, get at the core of each other's personal philosophies, and by doing this you get the sense that Wally is saying things he's never thought to say before, true things that he never really knew about himself.
Yeah, of course, personally, I usually don't like those quiet moments, you know, I really don't. I mean, things get too quiet, and I find myself just sitting there, you know, as we were saying before. I mean, whether I'm by myself or I'm with someone else, I just have this feeling of, my God, I'm going to be revealed. If I'm just trapped there and I'm not allowed to do things, but all I can do is just be there, well, I'll just fail.
The contents of the conversation doesn't so much relate to Epicureanism. There is a debate about existential meaning and a tension between Wally's dedication to the Western world's way of living and Andre's postmodern sensibilities that our Western way of living shouldn't confine us and our happiness may exist in creating our own meaning. There's an Epicurean sentiment here of denying the roles of the world and living how you find pleasure. But other than that, this film is about meta-ethics, the idea that there might not be an objectively right way to live. Nihilism, absurdism, existentialism, as terrifying as they are, might be the best starting point for living meaningfully. If those concepts interest you, please subscribe once again, because I'll be covering meta-ethics through popular films as my third and final video on this series of ethics. So you may be thinking, if their actual conversation barely has anything to do with Epicureanism, then why would I go out of my way to share it? Because it's not in the contents of their conversation that interests me, but it's in the quality of their conversation. Epicurus makes a point to say that friendships are core to living a good life, but why? Since he agrees with Aristotle that rational thought and living virtuously are important, he believes that having a good friend who you can bounce your ideas off of is massively beneficial towards your personal growth. Not only that, but if you do encounter hardship, or if your rationality brings you to disturbing thoughts, well, you have the support you need right in front of you. Someone who loves you unconditionally and who understands your deepest fears and who's willing to talk things out with you if you need it. It's someone to share the good and the bad with, and in turn, you'll both lift each other up in ways that'll maximize your pleasure higher than if you were to live alone. In another round, we kind of talked about it. We saw how his core group of friends lift each other up, how they laugh, how they indulge in their childlike whimsy, and how they're able to lift each other up when times get tough. But My Dinner with Andre shows Epicurus's ideal way to share each other's life, through rational dialogue, rather than just with those simple and fun times together. Wally is undeniably lost in this Western world. He's detached from himself and engulfed in the routine of his life. He's so detached, in fact, that he can't even get himself to share his own opinions with Andre, his own actual life. Why? Because maybe he doesn't even know what that is. But it's through indulging in Andre's conversation that Wally finally gets the courage to speak. Similar to Martin in another round, you catch that spark of life in this moment. We've spent half the film just bored to death listening to Andre talk endlessly about his amazing experiences, and then we catch that light. From now on, Wally shares unabashedly. He agrees, he disagrees, he shares his own philosophies he might not even have been aware of, and Andre asks him to explain more. By the end of their dinner, they've lost track of time entirely. Not only does this show how much fun Wally was having in conversing, but also how much fun he had in discovering himself. Andre pays for their meal, a sign he too appreciated their time deeply, and they depart. Wally walks away with some final ruminations. He's learned something here about himself and about the world through the fun he and Andre experienced as they learned about themselves. You get the sense Wally is better than he was before, all through a simple conversation. This beautifully represents that Epicurean power of friendship, to support, to share, to help, and to cause reflection. They're both better for this simple moment, and that's what Epicurus wholeheartedly believes in. Friends are a mode of growth, just in the nature of being someone you can authentically share your mind with, to share your rational thoughts. And at the end of the day, there's no denying there's something fun, something pleasurable, something that promotes your well-being. In the history of philosophy, Epicurus catches a lot of strays, especially in his Hellenistic era. Aristotle's well-being through virtue dominated, specifically with its most prominent offshoot, Stoicism. Like Epicureanism, Stoicism takes Aristotle's virtue ethics and puts its virtuous rationality into practice. But unlike Epicurus, they hold on to that idea that virtue is the only good. So they're always about applying rationality to the natural world around them. In the spirit of Aristotle's dream of godlike knowledge, the Stoics take their reflections on society's natural order and apply their observations to live in harmony with it. The more they accept what they can't control, the better life they'll live. Stoicism is definitely worth unpacking thoroughly. It's a philosophy that has fundamentally shaped our modern world. Yet, it's also a philosophy that's easily misunderstood. So in trying to find a film that embodies this philosophy, the most obvious example that I'm sure many of you know was Ridley Scott's Gladiator.
Are you not entertained?
Russell Crowe's Maximus perfectly embodies that fortified monolith of honor, duty, and wisdom, impenetrable to the suffering and pleasure of daily living. The film openly acknowledges Stoicism by depicting philosopher king Marcus Aurelius, one of the most notorious Stoic practitioners in all of history. But to my surprise, I actually found that Ridley Scott's later work, The Martian, may actually better embody the spirit of Stoicism, even if it's less overt in doing so. As we explore The Martian, I'll be unpacking the many facets of specifically Epictetus's Stoic philosophy, and by exploring the two simultaneously, I guarantee that we can gain a firm understanding of what it actually means to be Stoic. The film begins in the near future, where NASA has successfully landed astronauts on Mars. The crew has established a small, temporary base there with a short supply of food and enough time to collect samples, then leave.
How many samples do we need, Commander?
700 grams each.
At least that's what they hoped would happen.
We have a mission update. Storm warning.
Martinez, how's it look?
Not good.
Nothing?
Commander, I know you don't want to hear this, but Mark is dead. What the hell is wrong with you, man? My friend just died. I don't want my commander to die too.
Stability warning.
Mark!
Lunch.
Astronaut Mark Watney survived the storm and has now been abandoned, left to his own devices to try to survive an unforgiving planet with nothing but his wit to get him through. How can Mark possibly survive this impossible situation? Well, we'll see that the film will propose that Stoicism can get us through anything, and in fact is the best way to live even in the worst circumstances. So with Mark just waking up to his horrifying predicament, let's see how he's able to cope under the doctrines of Epictetus's Stoicism. Let's begin by exploring how Epictetus expands upon Aristotle's ideas on rationality being the only real good. Epictetus makes a bold claim and argues that we have complete control over ourselves, and everything that's not ourselves is completely out of our control. He says by nature, our capacity for choice is always unimpeded. It's ours and ours alone, which also makes us always accountable for our own actions. No matter how pressured you may feel in any given moment, no external thing can actually go into your brain and make your choices for you. At the end of the day, our convictions, our attitudes, our intentions, and our actions are all truly ours, unlike everything outside of ourselves. Cars, money, our honor, our friends, our own bodies, all those external things we think are ours, our property, they can always be stripped away from us. So Mark wakes up. He's alone. Everything around him, the things he believed were his, are gone. He's hurt. His suit's been punctured and he's rapidly bleeding out. The situation is undeniably bad. Or is it? You see, the films created the perfect analogy for the Stoics' belief about their metaphysical position. It's only you, the only thing you control, versus the external, uncontrollable natural world. And only your actions are the things you should focus on, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing you own. There's no point mourning what you've lost because you never owned any of that in the first place. So given the circumstance, what does Mark do? He does the only thing he actually can. He acts.
Hello, this is Mark Watney, astronaut. I'm entering this log for the record.
You'll notice that Mark carries this renowned sense of calm. He moves from one step to the next, wincing at his pain, yes, but never dwelling on it. It's impressive how well he acts, and if you notice yourself being impressed by him, well, you may be unknowingly agreeing to Aristotle's and the Stoics' ideas on what it means to be virtuous. Epictetus carries on Aristotle's idea that your only good is being virtuous through your rationality, but he wants to ask, Well, what's the actual practical meaning of this? If this is literally the only good, then everything else, all these externals, are literally absent of value because it's impossible for them to have any actual good in them. This is where you may start to be a little hesitant. Literally nothing outside of yourself has good. I mean, what about a hospital? It does good, it facilitates good. But Epictetus would respond by saying, yes, us using objects is good, but that doesn't give the objects themselves good or bad. It's only our actions that can ever be good or bad. So never make the mistake of thinking anything external is intrinsically good. You might be thinking this is a weird hill for Epictetus to die on, but it actually might be the most important thing he argues. You see, he believes that if you wholeheartedly adopt this mindset of correctly valuing the external world by not giving it any value at all, then there are some amazing outcomes that'll make you an even better person. When Mark awakes after being abandoned, you can imagine his mind filled with impressions of terror. He could be overwhelmed by hopelessness and despair at his impending starvation.
I have no way to contact NASA, and even if I could, it's going to be 4 years until a manned mission can reach me.
But he must remind himself, this isn't bad. This is an external experience that doesn't carry any actual value. Instead, he has his other belief, his faith in science. No, his faith in the only thing he actually has control over, his rationality.
Let's do the math. Our service mission here was supposed to last 31 souls. For redundancy, they sent 68 souls worth of food. That's for 6 people. So for just me, that's going to last 300 souls, which I figure I can stretch to 400 if I ration. So I got to figure out a way to grow 3 years worth of food here on a planet where nothing grows. Luckily, I'm a botanist. Mars will come to fear my botany powers.
He can focus on what to rationally do next. What's happened to him, his experience, isn't in his control. But his actions are.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back to work here.
Because he mentally corrects this value system in line with Epictetus's teachings, he becomes calm and capable, and he quickly lifts himself out of his situation by taking control of what he can. Once again, you can imagine someone labeling the situation as insurmountably bad, but the Stoic knows the truth, that no situation can actually be bad. Rationality is Mark's choice, and he does the undeniably good act of using his rationality to survive.
Hey there.
This is Epictetus's first pillar in living the Stoic life, to correct your value system based on the idea that every external is absent of any good, and it's only your volition and your rationality that can carry any good. Then Epictetus takes a lot of time to detail how you should go about dealing with your day-to-day with this in mind. Specifically by screening your impressions with your rationality. Epictetus has taken time to observe the world, and he notices that humans and animals both depend on impressions of the outside world to go about their day. It's basically a fancy word for what we perceive to have happened to us in any given moment, and the feelings that come with that. So when a squirrel sees that their nut's been stolen, they'll have a rush of anger or any number of feelings based on that initial impression. And this tends to be helpful because it motivates them to act and go steal their nut back. But Epictetus believes humans can rise above that compulsion. He notices that humans have a really unique faculty that animals don't have, the ability to or to not assent to our impressions. Of course, like the squirrel, humans also have impressions. You can imagine Mark's first impression here of being left behind by his crew being one filled with resentment and betrayal towards his crew for abandoning him. But we don't see that from Mark.
I'm alive, but I'm guessing that's going to come as a surprise to my crewmates.
The squirrel would absolutely act vindictively, but Mark is better than that. How can that be?
Best I can figure, this length of our primary communications antenna broke off and tore through my biomonitor, which kept me alive, even though the crew must have thought I was dead.
Epictetus believes that yes, we have these first impressions, the same as any other animal, but we also have the ability to think critically about them and then determine whether our impression is true or false, if it's in line with reality or not, and whether or not we should act on them. Specifically, we can look at our impression critically by comparing it against our pre-existing beliefs before any bad thing happened to us. In Mark's case, he may well have had that first resentful impression, but he can compare that against his belief that the crew would never leave him behind without it being absolutely necessary. So he's given two choices that contradict each other. One of his team's betrayal and one of his team's integrity. Mark ends up rejecting his first impression, and instead he's able to act in a way that's not only more modest and noble,
I'm guessing that's gonna come as a surprise to my crewmates.
but more importantly, it's actually in line with what really happened to him. His rationality brings him closer to reality, and that's exactly what Stoics believe is necessary for living a good life, to avoid being deceived and to live in accordance with nature. This is one of the core processes of Stoicism. Epictetus believes that to live your best life, you must take a breath. You're better than an animal, so actively think about what this striking impression looks and feels like. Actively think about the beliefs about the things involved, then analyze whether or not there's a contradiction between them. But how can we know whether or not an impression is right or wrong? Epictetus's last doctrine is that we must cultivate our rationality. You must learn to accurately characterize the external world. Otherwise, how will you be able to determine whether your impressions are right or wrong? So dedicate yourself to observing the natural world and learn to routinely correct your impressions based on your observations. This final doctrine is especially where Mark adopts the Stoic lifestyle.
I'm a botanist.
He's a scientist. What practice could be more dedicated to observing the natural world, testing your observations for truth, and correcting them when you're wrong? Mark, in fact, uses this powerful rationality to thrive under Mars's harsh climate, the same way we all might be able to under our own natural human condition. But how might you and I learn to cultivate our rationality without being a scientist? Well, Mark does that too.
They want constant updates on every HAB system. For redundancy, they send physical engineering
Oxygen you burn. So yeah, I blew myself up.
We all must journal daily. This gives us the opportunity to reflect on our days, to reflect and to correct on any misconceptions. Therefore, each day we become better and better at understanding the natural world around us. And we see in Mark's case that it's exactly during these reflections that he comes across the insight that permits him to thrive.
I know what I'm gonna do.
Mark almost seems sentenced to a cycle of stoicism. Time and time again, he meets traditionally bad situations with calm rationality, and that allows him to thrive. But you might actually notice that we don't get the chance to see his first impressions. So you could argue that the Martian doesn't get to show us that side of stoicism, except we do. We see the moments where he acts bad, when his impressions overpower him and causes him to lash out at everything around him. These outbursts shed some light that maybe in these other moments where he acts so impressively well, there is this kind of emotionality underneath. But all we see are the good Stoic outcomes, his virtuosity, his resilience, and his self-control. I want to quickly make a very, very important note about this screening impressions process. I don't want you all to mistakenly believe that Stoicism is always about rejecting your impression, because sometimes your emotional impressions are more correct than pre-existing beliefs. For example, Mark assumes that NASA has already told his crew, his second family, that he's still alive, but NASA didn't. But first, let's screen this impression as we should. So Mark gets this impression that NASA didn't tell the crew, and he has a pre-existing belief that NASA would have already told the crew. There's a contradiction here, so Mark has to ask himself which one in this case is actually more correct. And the answer?
No. If Watney is really alive, we don't want the Ares 3 crew to know.
How can you not tell them?
His impression. So in this case, the Stoic choice is to actually accept the impression over his pre-existing belief. Just because that impression is filled with emotionality doesn't mean that it's wrong. Of course, the turning point here is still acting virtuously, with calm and understanding, which Mark does not do.
They don't know I'm alive? What the F word? F word in gerund form, F word again, is wrong with you.
So he fails to act stoically, but his mental acceptance of his impression is actually the correct choice. And it's a super important example of how your emotional impressions are not always wrong. This begs the question though, if these emotional impressions may be correct, but we still need to act virtuously, how can we calm down that impulsive emotional reaction behind accepting the impression as true? Well, this is where Epictetus gets a little crazy. He believes that if we honestly learn to value the external world as the way we should, then the natural result will be a fundamental change in the intensity of these emotional reactions. Our negative feelings often feel outside our control, but actually Epictetus believes that we have the control. Those emotions, grief, fear, envy, desire, anxiety, they all result from the common mistake of thinking external things have value. So you always just have to remember you're in charge of what you think. Nothing else is. So you have to condition yourself to never mistakenly label outside things as good or bad. Once that's so ingrained, then you'll never feel those bad emotions again, because those bad emotions are tied to the idea that these external things could be good or bad. So by fully embracing this doctrine, your emotional reactions won't be as intense or as misguided. Time and time again, Marx failed, and Marx succeeded. He wrestles with the uncontrollable, the natural world, Mars's uninhabitable atmosphere, and he does so by taking control of what he can, himself. He's perfected Stoicism.
I'm dying for something big and beautiful.
He's rationed down to a quarter of what he should be eating, and his only hope of escape is a Hail Mary attempt to launch into Mars's atmosphere and finally meet back up with his crew.
About 2 minutes, Watney. How you doing down there?
I'm good. I'm anxious to get up to you. Thanks for coming back for me.
Well, we're on it.
Now he just has to will one last impossible feat into existence.
Velocity 741 meters per second, altitude 1350 meters.
That's too low.
It's fighting me. Booster separation complete.
We'll be 68 kilometers apart.
68 kilometers? Did you just say 68 kilometers?
Come on, guys. Keep it together. Work the problem.
I take this final moment symbolically. Him being stranded to the whims of Mars's natural world perfectly symbolized each one of our own struggles against the external world around us. We're all our own astronaut with only our own choices at our disposal. The objects around us, the politics, the people, they're Mars's uncontrollable climate. We make the choices we can for ourselves, but we also have to accept that there's no point trying to fundamentally change the world around us. Instead, we must focus on ourselves, on our own attitudes, and by doing so, we'll achieve the impossible. Maybe we too can transcend our universal isolation. Maybe we too can flourish. It's in Mark's second life, after he's accomplished exactly what Epictetus begs of us, that he makes the final right choice. You see, with all this talk of living autonomously, of devaluing not only the objects, but the people around you, you may be thinking this leads down a life of egoism. But Epictetus wants to instill in us one final value to help us use our mastery over ourselves for a final good end, for the love of the natural world, and a love for humanity. We see Mark sat at a park bench, now the Stoic master who's risen above his battle for autonomy. The Stoic process is natural to him now. He's already achieved flourishment. He looks down and notices a single piece of grass, persevering, growing in its graveled environment, almost a symbol of Mark's own Stoic, autonomous flourishment in the face of our human condition. Soldiers run by, but they stop for a moment to share their respect. This doesn't mean much to the Stoic. It's just the natural respect that follows living your Stoic lifestyle. But with this respect comes a duty. Epictetus argues we must take on our roles, whether that be in family or in society, and we must spread our knowledge, our dedication to rationality, our dedication to the good. And how does Mark do this?
Welcome to the astronaut candidate program. Now pay attention, because this could save your life.
He teaches, one of the most celebrated roles of the Stoic. And what exactly does he teach? He teaches Stoicism. He teaches how to live the good life. He teaches how to achieve eudaimonia.
When I was up there, stranded by myself, did I think I was going to die? Yes, absolutely. And that's when you need to know going in, because it's going to happen to you. This is space. It does not cooperate. At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Mark's story perfectly captures how to live well under Epictetus' Stoic doctrine. It depicts all three of Epictetus' core doctrines. You must correct your desires and your suffering, you must screen your impressions with your rationality, and you must dedicate yourself to cultivating your rationality. By doing this, you'll thrive, and you must then share your talents with the world by acting dutifully and modestly to the people around you. Only then will you have learned to live the perfect life. Hopefully, if I've done my job well, these movies have given you a firm understanding of not only the basic ideas of each of these philosophies, but also a practical look at what it really means to live those ways. Unlike my other videos, I've mostly kept my own opinions out of this, but now it's time for me to share my own thoughts. We've seen pure hedonism's pleasurable lifestyle and its general amorality. We've seen Aristotle's logical basis for rationality and virtue being the only good, but we've also sensed an absence of what that practically looks like. I find these two philosophies out of everything we've discussed to be the most lacking, but they serve as a fundamental groundwork for the amazing insights of Epicureanism and Stoicism. Now, it's worth mentioning that Epicurus and Epictetus have a historical animosity towards one another. Both philosophies wrestled each other for control over the ancient world, and that's because they both fundamentally disagreed with each other. There was common ground in that Epicurus supported a virtuous lifestyle too, but he believed that's just because you'll be able to live a more pleasurable lifestyle that way. In this sense, he believes that pleasure was always prioritized over virtue, but the Stoics fundamentally disagreed. They disagreed so fervently that they actually supported the ascetic lifestyle, to distance yourself entirely from pleasure, as that was part of that fundamental misunderstanding that external things have value. So you must not seek pleasure. You must only seek living virtuously. My question to you now is, which of these do you think leads towards towards a better life? If you're struggling to find an answer, an interesting starting point might be to compare these films. Another Round and My Dinner with Andre thoroughly depict the liberating possibility of pursuing your pleasure within a virtuous life. It's through pleasure that Martin finds the passion in living life, even in doing the right thing. He shares his passion with his friends, he shares his passion with his students, and he shares his passion with his family. Similarly, by indulging in a simple dinner with a friend, Wally's able to free himself from the shackles of his complacent lifestyle, and he learns a new perspective simply by rationally sharing himself. Epictetus' Stoicism might not actually support these endeavors. Don't seek the joy in what you do, even if what you do is virtuous, because joy isn't the end goal here. Epictetus does believe that you can experience joy for the goods of virtue and God, but otherwise you must be ascetic. Epictetus would not support Martin in seeking fun experiences with his friends and family. To curb their feelings of affection, Epictetus famously taught his students that as they kiss their loved ones, to repeat in their head that their loved ones will one day die. To me, I hear this kind of specific and I'm immediately repulsed. I want to find my passions for living, to enjoy music and dancing, to enjoy a simple conversation with a friend, to enjoy living my life. But that being said, with Stoicism's strict asceticism comes an infallibility that Epicureanism cannot compete with. Epictetus' Stoic logic in building up your autonomy is compelling. It's so compelling, in fact, that one of the fundamental doctrines around modern day therapy is built around controlling what you can and accepting what you cannot. Stoicism's sense of moral duty is absent in Epicureanism, and Stoics are also protected from losing themselves in their pleasure. Similarly, we see how Stoicism would undeniably help you thrive even within the worst of times. How could an Epicurean possibly match Mark's calm and resilience in the face of impossible odds? The Epicureanist would likely be stuck in grieving the loss of all the objects of pleasure around them, that they'd rarely rise up in the way that Mark the Stoic does. But here's my issue. What about when you're not struggling to survive? Why can't you just enjoy life when times aren't tough? Pleasure and pain mark the lifestyle of Epicureans, while Stoicism is simply dedicated to the natural world and simple duty to teach others to live well too. That right there is the key fundamental difference. Finally, a damning belief that I have to include is Epictetus' devotion to a separation between the mind and the body. For those who know me personally, I have a bachelor's in neuroscience, and it's well understood that our mind is as much controlled by our body and our environment as our body is controlled by our mind. What I mean is our psychology isn't free from the externals like the Stoics preach. Earlier, when I noted that the Stoic believes that nothing can actually crawl inside your brain and make choices for you, that's not actually as true as you might think. Many factors contribute to our decision making, and neuroscientists are discovering time and time again that many of those factors are completely out of our control. So it becomes impossible to strictly believe that we can cultivate complete autonomy through Stoicism. That being said, I can't deny that many of these practices may nonetheless inch you towards an autonomy that you otherwise wouldn't achieve. So once again, I ask you, which do you find more compelling? I know I absolutely believe in the power of building your autonomy and your rationality, but I just can't let go of my passion. I love freeing myself from what I ought to do and instead listening to myself by following what I love. I believe that valuing external objects is simply unavoidable, yet there's room to seeing some things as having a high pleasure and others as having a low pleasure. I do completely recognize that I open myself up to hurt, and I may not be living perfectly rationally, but I don't know, that feels like a burden that I'm happy to live with. At the end of the day, that's all I want, to be happy. And I hope my video can help you understand a bit better what that means, as I know it's helped me discover myself a little more too. Thanks for watching. As a final reminder, I'm making 2 more of these videos explaining the other 2 main bodies of ethical theories through popular movies. So if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely enjoy unpacking the modern ideas behind how we can learn to make the right choice, and the postmodern thought asking, what if there is no objectively right way to live? Already, I've summarized each of these main theories, including utilitarianism, Kant, nihilism, absurdism, and existentialism, so it'll only be a matter of time until those videos are posted. So please stick around. I'm sure you'll be a better person for it.